about you. I'm telling you, man. No, I wasn't born bad. You guys got it. See, I'm trying to tell you, man, they lied. They lied so bad to you all.
But you've been convicted of killing 7 men.
Everybody's looking at the number.
Does that not... You killed 7 men.
Former female wrestler Juana Baraza has been sentenced to 759 years in jail for killing 16 elderly women. Authorities say the woman, dubbed the little old lady killer, terrorized Mexico City's senior citizens out of anger toward her own mother.
So when you found out about the scale of the things that were happening in the house, how did it make you feel?
Devastated, heartbroken for all those that have been lost, and angry. Because I then started to doubt my thoughts, like what could I have done?
It may not always be quite as common to hear about dangerous women locked up behind bars than men, but that certainly doesn't mean that there are not plenty of brutal women out there. These dangerous women, some of whom were mothers, have done some of the most unthinkable things. They are remarkably tough and not the kind of person you want to mess around with. These are some of the most brutal women that nobody would want to run into while locked up in prison.
One of this area's most notorious killers goes before the state parole board again. I've learned tonight that child killer Mary Beth Tinning of Schenectady has just been denied parole again. Tinning was convicted back in 1987 of killing her 4-month-old daughter Tammy Lynn, murdering her with a pillow. Tinning had 9 children. All of them died in infancy or just beyond.
Mary Beth Tinning is one really messed up lady. She was born in a small town in New York in 1942. World War II was going on at the time, so her father was often deployed while her mother worked and took care of the family. Because her parents were busy most of the time, she often felt as if she was unwanted. As an adult, she would later claim that her father used to hurt her in her early years by hitting her with a fly swatter or locking her up in her room. It is not clear what effect this potential abuse could have had on the type of person Mary Beth would one day turn out to be. When she got older, she worked as a nurse and ended up marrying a man named Joseph Tinning, whom she met on a blind date. But it wouldn't be long before some strange things started happening within their marriage. Mary Beth took medication from a friend and used it to try to poison her husband by putting it in his grape juice. He nearly died from the incident, but when he found out what happened, he decided not to press charges against his wife. If he had, the future likely would have looked quite a bit different. Mary Beth had 2 children early on in their marriage, named Barbara and Joseph Jr. Then they had a 3rd child, a daughter named Jennifer in 1971. Jennifer was a sickly child who fought illnesses like meningitis and brain abscesses. She only survived 1 week before passing away. But this was only the very beginning of Mary Beth and Joseph's heartbreak. Just 2 weeks after the passing of Jennifer, Mary Beth was in the hospital once again. This time, it was with Joseph Jr., who was around 2 years old at the time. The hospital only held him briefly for observation before sending him back home. Just a short time later, he passed away, supposedly from heart complications. But it didn't end there. The next of the children to fall ill was Barbara, who was around 5 years old at the time. Mary Beth took her to the hospital after she had convulsions, and she died the next day. The next child that Mary Beth gave birth to was a son named Timothy, but less than 1 month later, she returned him to the hospital, dead. Apparently still longing for children despite so much heartbreak, Mary Beth adopted a newborn baby named Michael. Just a couple of months after that, she gave birth to a 6th child, a daughter named Mary Frances, who died in infancy from what was believed to be SIDS. Then, when he was just a toddler, Michael would also pass away, supposedly from falling down the stairs. But wait, you might be able to explain away all the previous deaths as being a result of a genetic disorder. But what about Michael? He was adopted, so he would not have shared the same DNA. This is where things start to get even more sketchy. Mary Beth's last child, Tammy Lynn, was born in August 1985. By December, she too was dead. This time, law enforcement could not overlook what was going on here, and Mary Beth was arrested. It was later revealed that she had used a pillow to cut off the child's airway. effectively killing her.
At first, it was thought they all died of SIDS or something possibly caused by some genetic disorder. Eventually, though, authorities came to believe she killed 8 of the 9. She confessed to 3 of those killings, sentenced to 20 years to life on the one murder of Tammy Lynn. This was her 4th time up for parole. And again, for the 4th time, she was denied.
Mary Beth is now an elderly woman, but that doesn't mean that the parole board thinks that she is no longer a danger to society or that she deserves to be freed. This is their reasoning.
This was an innocent, vulnerable victim who was entrusted in your care as her mother, and you viciously violated that trust, causing a senseless loss of this young life. They went on to say discretionary release would so deprecate the severity of the crime as to undermine respect for the law, as you placed your own interest above those of society's youth.
Mary Beth will most likely die behind bars. Do you think this is what she deserves? Let us know in the comments. Aileen Wuornos is one of the most famous female serial killers in history. She was pure evil and wasn't afraid for the world to know it.
The dark woods of Florida's highways. It was down dirt roads like this that 7 men met the madness of one angry woman.
Aileen was born in 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Her mom was just 16 years old when she gave birth to her. She had no father and was abandoned by her mom when she was very young. She was then sent to live with her grandparents. Aileen was just 14 years old when she would get pregnant herself. She was then thrown out of her parents' home and forced to live on her own. Her child was placed up for adoption. From there, her life continued to take a series of unfortunate turns. She started getting in trouble with the law by 18 years old and got married to a man who was 69 when she was still a teenager. Safe to say, the marriage did not work out. After she became violent with him, he filed a restraining order against her just weeks into the marriage. Aileen would then turn to a life of selling herself for money.
Basically, I'd say I had 5 to 6 guys per day interested. They could be interested in 30, they could be interested in 40, they could be interested for 100. I wasn't too high priced, so I could keep the customers satisfied.
From then on, Aileen would find herself in and out of jail for years, but it wasn't until November 1989 that she first became a killer. Aileen took the lives of 7 different men within a period of just 12 months. The men were between the ages of 40 and 65. She would lure them in with the premise that she would offer them special favors and then she would attack them. She was finally arrested in January 1991 at a bar. Her trial was unlike anything the nation had ever seen. Aileen was convicted of the murders and sentenced to pay the ultimate sacrifice, her life. Following her sentencing, she agreed to a jailhouse interview. During the interview, it's easy to see just how callous, angry, and aggressive of a person she really was. This was her response when the interviewer asked her an understandable question. Was she born bad?
Boy, I don't know about you. I'm telling you, man. No, I wasn't born bad. You guys got it. See, I'm trying to tell you, man, they lied. They lied so bad to you all.
But you've been convicted of killing 7 men.
Everybody's looking at the number.
Does that not... You killed 7 men.
Aileen claims that because she just killed her victims but didn't do anything crazy to their bodies, that she's not the kind of monster that she was made out to be. She says that the men also did not have to suffer. She even claimed that O.J. Simpson was a bigger monster than her. Aileen says that she was betrayed by everyone she ever knew or cared about. This included her former girlfriend, who testified against her during her trial. It was because of that she said she didn't care what happened to her life.
Lee, it sounds like you've been betrayed by everyone.
That's right, I was. That's why I don't care if I'm executed and leave this planet.
Tyria Moore was the name of Aileen's former partner. While up until now, Aileen has appeared to be nothing more than an emotionless, cold-hearted killer, she did shed tears in court as she found out about the way she was betrayed by the person she loved the most.
But it gets worse. Tyria had another deal going with the arresting police. They were trying to sell Hollywood the movie rights to Lee Wuornos' life and crazy times.
Why did you lie to her about those number of things?
Because I wanted her to keep talking
about the offenses so I would be cleared.
Ultimately, a film was made about Aileen's life. This allowed others to make money off of her hardships, and she was not very happy about it, to say the least.
It's making me get bitter, evil, angry. I've never been before in my life. Worse than even out there with those men. This is evil, what those people have done to me.
Do you feel anger or even hatred towards men?
I never hated men, but now I do. I mean, not all. I have a category.
The men that she hated the most were cops, lawyers, and judges. This is likely because of the role they played in her ending up where she was. Aileen was eager for the day of her death to arrive so that people would stop making money off of her.
There's no sense in having me tormented for the rest of my life when I don't deserve to be tormented. I did what anybody else would do. And so there's only clemency or the chair. You make your pick, people, because that's the only way it's going to be.
Despite everything she did, Aileen was not without anyone to care about her during her final years on the planet. One 44-year-old woman named Arlene came forward to be the mother that this killer never had.
Why did you adopt Lee Wuornos?
For one reason and one reason only. We wanted her to know what it felt like to be part of a family.
Born-again Christian Arlene Prowley has a fondness for adopting stray animals. When she adopted Lee, she planned a life together on her farm. Now she'd be happy just to keep her alive.
She died on October 9th, 2002, after declining her last meal. She was 46 years old at the time of her death. Her last words were, "Yes, I would just like to say, I am sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back, I'll be back." Joanna Dennehy is one of Britain's most notorious female serial killers.
A violent individual who'd killed without hesitation or remorse, and for no other reason than the pleasure and gratification it offered her.
She is heartless, ruthless, and sadistic.
Joanna came from a loving home and had a very supportive mother, but that didn't stop her from turning into a monster. In 2013, she was arrested after going on a brutal 10-day killing spree. Her victims were all men, and she used a knife to end their lives. They ranged in age from 31 years old to 56. Their names were Lukaz Slabowaski, John Chapman, and Kevin Lee. What was her motive, you may ask? She didn't have one other than simply wanting to kill. Her victims were randomly selected. Michelle Bowles, Joanna's former neighbor, said that the woman who turned into a killer didn't show signs of being a monster early on.
She was polite to me. Like butter wouldn't melt on her mouth, basically. She was well spoken to me and never swore. She was actually quite pleasant, do you get what I mean? I showed her respect. She loved babies. She was excellent with children. I didn't have a problem with her. When I saw her or spoke to her, I said hello, she said hello back.
But something in Joanna's mind must have eventually snapped. In the years following Joanna's crimes and eventual arrest, her mother, Kathleen, spoke out. Kathleen said that when she heard what her daughter did, it was as if hearing about a stranger. She would have never expected her sweet little girl she knew to turn out like this. Joanna was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. She will never live outside of custody again. Before getting locked up, she had one child, a daughter named Cheyenne. Cheyenne's father, John, ended up taking her away when she was just 9 years old in order to protect her from her mother. At that time, Joanna was already beginning to exhibit dangerous and violent behavior. When Cheyenne turned 18 years old, she made the decision to write to her mother in prison. She let her know that she wasn't looking for a relationship, but just wanted to learn more about her. Cheyenne thought her mother hated her and didn't even expect a response. But to her surprise, she ended up receiving a letter back that was full of love and warmth. This gave her the confidence she needed to meet her mother in person. Cheyenne reported that her mother apologized for all the things she did wrong, but acknowledged that there is nothing she can do to make it right. Griselda Bianca was known as the Black widow. She worked in the trade of illegal substances. She didn't just help trade, she orchestrated the entire thing during the 1970s all the way through the 2000s. Her distribution system worked to bring illegal substances from Colombia into the United States. It made approximately $80 million in just 1 month. Griselda was constantly on the run because she was always being sought after by law enforcement that were eager to bring her down for her role in the distribution system. She was finally arrested in February 1985 and convicted. She was sentenced to spend 15 years behind bars. But while behind bars, it was later revealed that she was behind 3 different murders. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. Griselda was released from prison in 2004 and returned to her home in Medellin. At that point, she was over her life of crime and instead focused on her family. She had 4 children, all boys. Despite the fact that Griselda had given up the trade, she still had people that didn't like her. This ultimately cost her her life. On September 3rd, 2012, Griselda and her daughter-in-law were out buying meat at a butcher shop when an assassin went by on a motorcycle and fired at her. She was 69 years old at the time of her death. Several years after Griselda died, her son Michael did a television special in which he was filmed visiting her grave. He wept, saying that Griselda was killed in her old age, only because her enemies could never catch her when she was in her prime.
They killed my mom. It's kind of hard to see my mom's tomb because reality sets in, you know? You got your beautiful grandchildren and you got your beautiful granddaughter here, and I'm gonna make sure that they don't have to grow up how we did and live that life. They're gonna be good kids. I just want to make you proud, Mama.
In January 2024, actress Sofia Vergara will star in a highly anticipated Netflix series, during which she will play the role of Griselda. Rosemary, or Rose West, is a British serial killer. She took the lives of at least 9 people, all young women, between 1973 and 1987. She worked with her husband, Fred West, to commit the crimes. Rose met Fred when she was 15 years old and he was 28. They had both been harmed by their parents growing up, so they were able to connect in a unique way. There was nothing that Rose's family could do to keep her away from Fred.
Maybe it was something that Rose gave off implicitly. But something in Fred connected with what had happened to Rose and the way she was and the way she'd been treated by her father. And it was like a union of 2 souls.
I think it was the perfect storm.
They ended up moving in together, and before long they had a baby together. They got married in 1972, and not long after had a second child. Rose and Fred were very deranged people who experienced pleasure in causing other people pain. They would lure young girls into their home and take advantage of them, all the while enjoying every second of it. Their own daughter even became one of their victims when she was 13 years old. They brainwashed her and told her that everything she had to go through was normal. Rose took a special dislike to Fred's 8-year-old stepdaughter, Charmaine West, whom she murdered in 1971. Both Fred and Rose were finally arrested and set to face trial in 1995. But before then, Fred took his own life. Meanwhile, Rose pleaded not guilty to 10 counts of murder. The jury unanimously found her guilty, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She appealed the conviction almost immediately and tried to pin all of the murders on her late husband, saying that he acted alone. But the court refused to hear her appeal. In 2019, she was moved to a different prison than the one that she had been residing in after another prisoner threatened to kill her. In 2023, a woman named Jane Hammer, who lived in the West when she was just a teenager, came forward to share her story. Jane made the decision to move out of the West home after she caught wind that something very evil was going on, even if she wasn't quite sure what. This was a decision she sprung on the couple without telling them ahead of time.
So when you found out about the scale of the things that were happening in the house, how did it make you feel?
Devastated, heartbroken for all those that have been lost, and angry. Because I then started to doubt my thoughts like, what could I have done?
As of September 2023, Rose remains behind bars and will likely die in prison. Do you think that all of these terrible things still would have happened if Rose had never met Fred West? Could countless lives have been spared? Or was the outcome always going to end up happening anyway? Let us know in the comments. Juana Baraza is a Mexican serial killer who earned herself the title, the Old Lady Killer. Juana took the lives of at least 16 elderly women, but some say the number could be as high as 40. Her victims were all at least 60 years old, and she always robbed them before or after ending their lives. She was known to be quite brilliant and sneaky, which is how she managed to get away with killing so many people. Juana Baraza was a tough woman and had even made a name for herself as a professional wrestler. She went by the name Dama de Silencio, or the Lady of Silence. Her victims could not come close to overpowering her. When Juana was carrying out her reign of terror throughout Mexico City, government officials knew they had a serial killer on their hands. But what nobody could have expected was that the killer was a woman. Juana was arrested after fleeing the homes of one of her victims. Because she had such a masculine build, she was initially mistaken as either a man or a transgender person. The prosecution used evidence from fingerprints that were found on the scene to link Juana to the murders. She confessed to only 4 of the murders she ended up being connected to and denied the rest. What could make a person, especially a woman, want to brutally take the lives of helpless old ladies? She would later say that it was her way of getting revenge for the way that she was treated by her own mother when she was young. Her mother had a drinking problem and reportedly traded Juana to a man in exchange for next to nothing. Juana was tried and convicted in 2008, her case shocking the world.
Former female wrestler Juana Baraza has been sentenced to 759 years in jail for killing 16 elderly women. Authorities say the woman, dubbed the Little Old Lady Killer, terrorized Mexico City's senior citizens out of anger toward her own mother. Witnesses described the suspect as someone with a larger physique wearing a dress.
Juana told the court that she planned to appeal her conviction.
Even if she's unsuccessful, she could only be required to serve 50 years in jail because that is generally the maximum sentence for murder in Mexico. There are no formal life imprisonment or death penalty sentences in the country.
Due to the age she was when she was convicted, it is very unlikely that Juana will ever see life outside of the prison walls ever again. Nevertheless, she has been reportedly trying to make the best of her time in custody by being productive. She works as a gym instructor and sells tacos so that she can send the money back home to her family. As of September 2023, Juana is 65 years old and remains behind bars. Do you think that Juana deserves the sentence she got, or do you believe that her own life, if it was an option, is what she should have given up after what she did to all of those innocent old ladies? Let us know in the comments. Janine Jones is a sadistic serial killer who took the lives of up to 60 babies while she worked as a nurse. She would kill the defenseless children by injecting them with different substances. This went on throughout the 1970s and early 1980s until she was finally arrested in 1984. The case against Janine Jones was very complicated, and legal proceedings would go on for years and years. This is because of the sheer number of victims involved and the challenge that it was to pinpoint how many babies Janine actually killed. But just because the legal proceedings were not over yet, didn't mean that Janine was getting to live a life of freedom. In 1985, she was sentenced to 99 years in prison for the death of just one of the victims, Chelsea McLennan. Later, she was sentenced to another 60 years for almost killing another child. But it didn't end there. She was indicted in 2017 for the murder of Joshua Sawyer. But it wasn't until January 2020 that she actually pleaded guilty to the child's murder, ending this whole ordeal once and for all and leading her to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Finally, it is over. That is what the mother of one of the 5 infants that Janine Jones, known as the killer nurse, said following Jones's sentencing today.
As part of a plea agreement, Jones sentenced to life in prison. Paul Venema in court for the plea, and the emotional reaction from the families of those babies.
Can you imagine having to wait decades to get the proper justice after your beloved baby was killed? That is what the parents of Joshua had to do in this case. They addressed their son's killer in court at her final sentencing and did not hold back their hatred for her.
I will leave you with this.
I hope for you to live a long and miserable life behind bars.
The judge also did not hold back when addressing Janine, who, at her sentencing, sported a pair of broken glasses and needed a walker to get in and out of the courtroom.
We took God's most precious gift, babies, defenseless, innocent.
Following sentencing, the families of the other infants Jones had pled guilty to killing were permitted to address her. Afterward, they met with us outside the courtroom.
Nobody knows this pain I carry, only I.
One of the victim's sisters, Melissa Lunas, who is now an adult, also had the chance to share her mind with Janine. She is relieved that Janine will live out the rest of her life behind bars.
Though my brother's in a box, she's gonna spend the rest of her life in a box too. So I can smile today knowing that.
One huge question still remains. Why would anybody ever want to kill defenseless little babies? After all, Janine actually had 2 children of her own, so she must have been able to imagine the devastating agony and heartbreak that her victims' mothers would experience when they realized that they would never hold their children alive again. Janine never really gave a clear answer as to why she did this, but some have speculated that she was trying to play God or pretend to be some sort of miracle worker, because she did end up saving some of her victims. We may never know for sure why someone who was trained to save the lives of infants ended up killing so many instead. As of fall 2023, Janine remains behind bars, where she will stay until the day that she dies. She is 73 years old. If the horrific acts these women committed can tell us anything, it's that it doesn't matter where you come from or whether you are male or female. Even the people who started their lives normally can flip a switch and turn into heartless killers who think of nobody but themselves. It is terrifying to wonder about who the next female killer to terrorize our society will be. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our other future content.